I remember the moment I realized I was utterly alone, like it happened yesterday, even though it was the most vivid nightmare I've ever lived. The fluorescent lights above the emergency room ceiling buzzed faintly, harsh and antiseptic, reflecting off the polished linoleum floors. The metallic taste of panic was in my mouth, a bitter reminder that something was horribly wrong. I gripped the hospital gown at my shoulders, trying not to shake, trying not to let the fear make my voice crack, when the nurse leaned close and asked gently, "Where is your family?" I laughed, but it was hollow. "They're busy," I said, almost automatically, though my chest tightened and my stomach twisted. She tilted her head, clearly uncertain how to respond. The realization hit me in slow motion, a weight that I could not shift. My family was at my cousin's baseball tournament, already paid for the hotel, my mother had said, practically dismissing my fear. My father told me I would be asleep anyway, that it would be fine. My siblings had sent me texts, half-hearted and distracted, telling me to keep them updated. None of it mattered now. I wanted to scream, but the words would not come. My hands trembled on the crisp white sheets as I tried to remember what it felt like to be noticed, to be needed. But that had never been me. I had always been the quiet one, the steady one, the one who never demanded anything, the one who never caused scenes, the one who could disappear and no one would notice. And yet here I was, on the edge of something terrifying, with no one at my side. My name is Marlo, and I had just turned 28. I had always assumed that when things got hard, my family would show up, that loyalty and love were automatic, that being the good, obedient daughter meant someone would be there to catch me. I was wrong. Completely wrong. The hospital staff moved around me, preparing for surgery. I felt my pulse in my throat, fast, irregular. I could see the sterile machines blinking, hear the faint whir of oxygen pumps. I tried to focus on something else, anything else, to distract myself from the hollow ache in my chest. But every thought returned to the same inescapable fact. I was alone. I consented to surgery by myself, signing the papers with a hand that barely stopped shaking. I glanced at the nurse one last time, and she gave me a kind smile that felt almost sacred, a small reminder that humanity existed even when my family could not be bothered. I whispered to myself, almost as if I were saying it to the universe, I will not beg for love anymore. I will not beg for attention. I will not let this define me. When I woke, the room was empty. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something cold, metallic, almost like the taste of the panic from before. A plastic tray of lukewarm broth sat on the side table. I reached for it, my stomach nodding not from hunger, but from the impossible truth that no one was there to check on me, to hold my hand to tell me everything was going to be okay. My family arrived 2 days later, their faces tight with irritation, their voices defensive. I said little, let their words wash over me without a response. Something inside me changed that day. A thread that I had not realized had held me tethered to their world snapped quietly, invisibly, but irrevocably. I could feel it unraveling along my spine, leaving a hollow freedom that was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I sat up in the hospital bed, staring at the pale walls, my mind already racing ahead. I would leave, I would disappear, I would find a life where I mattered, a life where I was seen, where my presence had weight, where I was not expendable, not secondary, not invisible. And with that thought, with that quiet, unspoken vow, I began to imagine a life far away from here, a life of my own making. The ache remained, yes, but it was different now. It was the ache of anticipation, the silent pull of something larger waiting just beyond the horizon. I packed my car the night before dawn, shoving the last of my clothes into a battered duffel bag while the city slept. I left no note, no explanation, nothing for anyone to grasp onto. The apartment felt too small now, the walls pressing closer every time I thought about the way they had left me alone in the hospital, their voices absent, their concern only performative when finally forced. The highway stretched ahead, dark and infinite, and I drove until the streetlights blurred into streaks, until the city I had known for 28 years became nothing more than a memory fading in the rearview mirror. I did not look back, not once. I chose a coastal city halfway across the country, a place where no one knew my name, where my past could not catch me. I rented a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a creaky floor that groaned beneath every step. My first night there, I lay on a mattress that smelled faintly of salt and mildew, staring at the ceiling and letting the quiet envelope me. I allowed myself to be no one for a while. No responsibilities, no obligations, no eyes silently judging me. I watched sunrises over the water, their slow emergence a lesson in patience, in how time could rebuild even the most fractured heart. Silence, I learned, could heal rather than punish. I found work at a small coastal cafe, washing dishes and serving coffee to people who never asked about my past. I liked it. The rhythm of early mornings, the hum of conversation, the smell of freshly baked bread. All of it became a tether to a life I could claim as my own. Nights I enrolled in classes for medical administration and patient advocacy, inspired by the kindness of the nurse who had held my hand before surgery. I threw myself into studying, letting every frustration, every sense of betrayal, fuel a quiet ambition. I found mentors who saw something in me before I saw it myself, people who nudged me forward with subtle encouragement, who believed I could be more than what my family had allowed me to be. The phone in my apartment buzzed periodically. Messages stacked up like bricks, a mix of irritation, guilt, and open panic from the people who had abandoned me. They had no idea where I was, no understanding that I was alive, building a spine out of every moment they had not bothered to exist alongside me. I read some of them, laughed at a few, and left most unread. My silence became a shield and a statement both. I did not owe them anything, not even an acknowledgement of their panic. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel myself change. I discovered muscles I had never flexed, strength in my own decisions, confidence in a voice that had spent decades muted. I was becoming someone my old life could not recognize, and the knowledge filled me with a quiet satisfaction that was almost electric. Yet the pressure remained, tight and unyielding. Every day I felt it build, a hunger, a tension, a pull towards something I could not yet name but knew I would find. By the time the first month had passed, I no longer remembered the exact shade of my family's disapproval, only the hollowness it left behind. And I liked it that way. I liked the freedom it gave me. I liked that I could rebuild myself in silence, step by step, leaving behind the version of Marlowe who had waited for attention that never came. I was learning that absence could be more powerful than presence, and that sometimes the world had to be stripped away entirely before you could understand exactly who you were. I would not respond yet. Not today, not tomorrow. This was my year, my quiet reclamation, my rebirth. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning while I was refilling the sugar jars at the cafe. The subject line read, "Opportunity at the Patient Advocacy Network." I almost deleted it, assuming it was another generic job posting. But curiosity made me open it. They had seen my coursework, my volunteer work, my drive. They wanted to interview me for a position investigating cases of medical neglect and supporting vulnerable patients. For a moment, I just stood there with the rag in my hand, heart pounding, the scent of coffee and salt air mingling around me. I had not realized how ready I was until that moment. 2 weeks later, I walked into the office of the nonprofit with my resume folded neatly in my bag and a sense of quiet purpose. The director, a composed woman named Evelyn, asked what drew me to patient advocacy. I told her the truth. I said I knew what it felt like to be invisible on a hospital bed, to be treated like an inconvenience, to realize that people you loved could vanish when you needed them most. She nodded once and said, "That kind of pain, when channeled right, changes systems." I got the job. The work consumed me in the best possible way. I interviewed families who had been dismissed by doctors, patients who had fallen through cracks no one seemed to notice, nurses who wanted to do the right thing but were afraid of losing their jobs. Every story felt like a spark catching fire inside me. I traveled across counties, sitting in waiting rooms, taking notes, asking the questions no one else dared to ask. My confidence sharpened with each case. My voice stopped trembling. I learned to walk into boardrooms full of administrators and speak calmly while holding their negligence in plain view. A few months in, our team uncovered a case that would change everything. A local hospital had been falsifying post-surgical reports to cover up complications. One of the patients had died, her family ignored for months. I led the audit that exposed the truth. The story hit the local papers within days. For the first time in my life, my name appeared in print next to something that mattered. Investigator Marlo Kane of the Patient Advocacy Network led the inquiry, the article read. I cut out the clipping and tucked it into my notebook, not out of vanity, but because it felt like proof that I existed. Then came the messages. My mother's tone shifted from guilt to desperation. Long, rambling emails full of half apologies and rewound memories. My father tried to sound authoritative, as if he could summon me home by willpower alone. You've made your point, Marlo, he wrote. Now come back. My brother sent jokes that landed like stones. My sister wrote once, just 2 words. Please respond. I read them all. Then I locked my phone in the desk drawer and went back to work. They were finally feeling the silence they had built around me for years. The absence they had taught me was now theirs to endure. One evening, as I walked out of the office, Evelyn stopped me by the door. There's a new project coming up, she said. Temporary, but important. The hospital in your hometown has requested an external review for patient compliance. We want you to lead it. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. The name of that hospital, the same place I had once been left alone under sterile lights, hung between us. I managed to nod to say I would think about it. That night, sitting by the window of my apartment overlooking the water, I opened my phone again. Their unread messages glowed in the dark like tiny ghosts. I did not reply. Not yet. I stared out at the horizon and thought, almost calmly, that maybe some returns are not about going home. Maybe they are about finishing what began when everyone else walked away. When the plane descended over the flat sprawl of my hometown, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing someone else's life through glass. The fields looked smaller than I remembered, the city quieter, dimmer. I arrived without announcement, rented a short-term apartment downtown, and reported to the hospital Monday morning. Walking through those sliding glass doors again, I half expected the old panic to return. The scent of antiseptic, the memory of fluorescent lights, the echo of abandonment, but it didn't. Instead, I felt steady. I was not the woman who had once begged for company. I was here as a consultant, brought in to correct the kind of systemic neglect that had almost swallowed me. The staff greeted me with professional warmth. You must be Marlo Kane, a nurse said, shaking my hand. We've heard about your work with the Patient Advocacy Network. Administrators spoke of me in meetings with careful respect, citing my reputation as if I were a figure pulled from a report rather than a person who had once lain helpless in one of their beds. They had no idea that the woman they were praising had once been their overlooked patient. It was a secret I held close, a silent advantage. Days fell into a rhythm. I reviewed case files, interviewed medical teams, walked corridors lined with framed photos of donors and community events. My footsteps echoed softly, confident, purposeful. I could feel my authority in the way people listened when I spoke, the way silence settled after my questions. For the first time, this building responded to me. I was not invisible here anymore. Rumors reached me through old acquaintances before the week ended. My family, it seemed, had crafted their own narrative. To neighbors and friends, I was on an extended overseas assignment. Too busy to visit, too important to call. They spoke of me vaguely, using pride as camouflage for shame. People told me my mother seemed jumpy whenever someone mentioned my name. My father avoided certain topics at church. They were carrying the weight of what they had done, but they were too afraid to name it. Word of my return spread slowly, almost like a whisper carried on wind. I ran into my sister at the grocery store on a rainy Wednesday evening. She was standing near the produce section, holding a bag of apples, when our eyes met. The color drained from her face. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I gave a polite, distant nod and turned away. My phone lit up before I even reached the parking lot. Calls from my father, then my mother, then both in quick succession. That night, there were 8 missed calls and 3 voicemails filled with frantic pleading. I deleted them all without listening. Silence had become my language now. Every unreturned call, every ignored message was a conversation they had to have with themselves. I was not punishing them. I was simply refusing to give them the comfort of pretending nothing had changed. At the end of the month, the hospital board held a recognition event to highlight the results of my audit. The conference hall gleamed with polished tables and soft lighting. As I walked onto the stage, applause filled the room. My name was announced, my work praised, my findings commended as transformative. From the podium, I could see them, my parents, my sister, my brother, sitting in the back row, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on me. They had slipped in quietly, hoping to witness some sign of reconciliation. I looked straight through them. After the ceremony, as the crowd gathered to shake my hand and congratulate me, I walked past my family without a word. My mother rose halfway from her seat, but I did not pause. The air felt heavy with everything unsaid, every apology still waiting for a place to land. The tension pressed close, sharp and unresolved, humming with the power of what was coming next. I walked up the familiar steps to their front porch and paused for a moment, letting the weight of the year press against me. The house looked the same, yet somehow smaller, tired, as if it had been waiting for me, and realized too late that I was no longer theirs to command. I rang the doorbell, and when it swung open, I saw their faces, drawn and pale, eyes wide with the mixture of fear and guilt that had settled into the past 12 months like dust. They had been expecting a cautious, conciliatory version of me. They were about to get the truth. My mother began first, her voice trembling as she tried to fill the silence I had cultivated. "Marlo, She stopped, as if the words were too heavy for her own mouth. My father jumped in, insisting they had never understood the severity, that they had made a mistake, that they assumed I would be fine. My sister stood behind them, her hands twisting nervously, her eyes refusing to meet mine. They cried, they justified, they flailed in ways that had no effect on me. I let them. I had waited an entire year for this moment, for their defenses to crumble under their own awareness. Then I spoke, slowly, deliberately, each word measured to land exactly where it needed to. I told them about the emergency room, the fluorescent lights, the metallic taste of panic, the nurse who had asked where they were, and the hollow laugh I had given in response. I described what it felt like to lie in that hospital bed at 28, knowing everyone who should have cared had chosen a baseball game instead. I told them about waking up after surgery, alone, the cold broth on the side table, the silence that stretched for hours. I told them that their absence did not break me. It released me. The effect was immediate. My mother's shoulders slumped, her eyes filling with tears she could no longer stop. My father's face went pale as his authority, which had always been so absolute, faltered under the weight of the truth. My sister began to sob quietly. The words she had rehearsed over and over caught in her throat. They begged, stumbled, pleaded. They apologized in a raw way, the kind that comes when someone finally sees what they have lost. But I did not step forward. I did not embrace them. I did not resume the role I had once been forced into. The obedient, reliable daughter who existed to smooth over their lives. I left them in the room with their guilt fully exposed, with the realization that they had lost the version of me they had always assumed would wait patiently for their attention. I walked down the driveway with my head high, letting the finality settle around me. There was no looking back. The door closed behind me, and with it, the last chapter of their influence over my life. There would be no sequel, no reconciliation forged out of fear, no shadow of old roles lingering. The destruction was complete. And yet, as I stepped into the evening air, I felt not anger, but clarity. Betrayal arrives quietly, often disguised as neglect or distraction, and it teaches in ways no lecture ever could. Sometimes, the most potent revenge is not fire, but the quiet reclaiming of one's own life, the cool air that enters when a long-closed window finally opens. I breathed in deeply, the horizon opened before me, and understood that disappearance can become rebirth, and loss can become freedom. I had taken the first, last, and only step necessary. My life was mine, fully, finally, and irrevocably.